Well, hi, my name is Andy Gore, and I want to welcome you to today's webinar. This webinar is part of our Resilient Kids and Youth project, and today I'm joined by one of our Outback Futures staff members, speech pathologist, in fact, Sunshine McDonald. Welcome, Sunshine.
Hi, thanks Andy for having me.
It's great to have you. And today we're going to be looking at a really cool topic. So, what is it for today?
Well, we're going to be talking about 5 ways to help your child have a great start in life. So, we know that giving our kids a great start in life creates a solid foundation so that through childhood and adulthood, it sets them up for healthy mental status and so on. So, I'll be sharing 5 really easy, everyday ways that we can invest in a child's well-being. I guess from what we've learned is that child-adult relationships that are responsive, so the adult responds to the child, and attentive, so lots of back and forth interactions. That's what really helps build a strong foundation in a child's brain for all their future learning and development. You can call it sort of like serve and return. So that's what we're going to be talking about today.
That's great. I didn't realize we were going to be talking about tennis, but serve and return. There you go. Well, I look
Yes.
forward to hearing more about that as we unpack that today. But why don't you share with us, Sunshine, about some of the challenges that parents might be experiencing in trying to build a strong foundation for their kids' life? I can imagine that being a really stressful or busy time of life. I personally don't have kids, but I've watched some of my friends start to have their babies, and I've just observed that it can be really challenging.
Yeah, Andy, I think you were spot on talking about the busyness. I think that's having young children can be a really busy time, and you're trying to balance demands, between your kids, partner, friends, family, you work if you're working as well. So, and sometimes we can feel guilty as a parent. I've got 2 kids. My son's grown up essentially now. My daughter's in high school, but you can feel guilty that you're not doing everything that you need to for your kids. And I think,
Mm.
it's a great reminder. These tips that we're going to talk about today, it's just the small moments that can really help. So hopefully we'll lift some of that burden of guilt.
Yeah, that's great, Sunshine. Well, it is exciting, but it's also really important. And so I'm wondering if you can share with us some of the importance, or why are we even having this conversation today?
Yeah, I think we've always known that, the early years in a child's life are important, but the research, I guess, is really showing more and more what happens in a child's brain. They talk about the architecture of the brain and how the brain is built, and it's built at a really fast rate when a child is, in those early years, and it's very dependent on the environment around the child and the people around the child. Um, Caring adults in a child's life have an amazing opportunity to foster feelings of trust and safety in their babies, which then helps toddlers to establish a real sense of self and to become confident explorers. And so, research really shows that to ensure that good start in life, that all infants and toddlers need good, healthy, strong families, and positive early learning experiences.
And those things, yeah, you can just imagine. And we know, I guess, as adults, just how important that is for our own
Mm.
functioning. But I guess it all starts from those early years and how that's all set up. But this whole conversation, Sunshine, today has all been around and started by this conversation that Outback Futures has been involved in for a couple of years, called the Resilient Kids Project. And
Mm.
so I'm just wondering if you can share a little bit about how starting life well as kids and is really helpful for resilience and a robust resilience moving forward in their adult life as well.
Yeah, I think certainly what is being found is that if we can build that strong foundation in those early years, that sets children up for lifelong learning, sets them up in managing, their emotions, their behaviour, and their health, mental health, and general health. And so that then will equip them to better face life's challenges, to be more resilient as life throws the things at them that, are bound to come.
Yeah, that's right. And we've been using this phrase at Outback Futures, which is called bouncing forward. And it's our take on that definition of resilience, traditionally called bouncing back. And we're sort of suggesting that we cannot really go back, but we can bounce forward. And so that's the positive aspects is, I guess, even though, we might feel like we might even stuff up in our role as a parent, but there are still really positive ways of bouncing forward. And as kids grow and develop, there's still new opportunities every day to make a difference and to build a really strong, healthy start, which I guess is the conversation we're having today. So, Sunshine, we're going to dive into some tips, but, why don't you just share with us, what's one thing, what's the parents and carers can do to really help their kids have a great start?
Yeah, I think often it can sound like an enormous task. But yeah, really all it takes is small moments during everyday activities. So it's not sort of setting aside, an hour to do a specific game or whatever, but it's just in the day to day. So things like, a simple game of playing peekaboo with your child is actually, has an impact in developing a child's brain. Or, chatting while you're helping the child get dressed or giving them some food. So it's just everyday activities, you're taking small moments, can make a big impact.
And what a great encouragement at the start of our conversation today is actually, I'm sure there's things that parents and carers are already doing. And I hope that this conversation kind of builds that encouragement that they're already doing some really great stuff. And here's some of the ways that they can be affirmed in what they're doing. But also, I think, hopefully in some of the practical tips that we're about to give, Sunshine, that, people, our parents and carers will feel encouraged to try something new maybe as well. So, Sunshine, let's dive into some of those tips now. What's the first tip that you've got today for our parents about how to start their kids' life with that really great foundation?
Yeah, thanks, Andy. I think the first one that we're going to have a look at is about just simply sharing your child's focus. So tuning into what your child is focused on. And we can see this in, a number of different ways. You can see what a child is looking at. They might be pointing to something, or they might be verbalizing and saying a word about something. Other clues might be just even making a sound, or you'll see something on their face, a particular facial expression, and you go, oh, hold on, what are they looking at? What are they focused on? And obviously we can't do this all day, every day, because we've got, jobs to do, things to do around the house, places to go. But it's just, again, taking advantage of just small opportunities throughout the day to share our child's focus.
Yeah. And one example that comes to mind of watching my friends is they'll often say things like, the fan is the most entertaining thing in the room. The ceiling fan, the baby is just staring at the fan. Every room we walk in, it's the fan. So Sunshine, share with us some other examples of what sharing the focus could practically look like.
Yeah, I think, things like, well, obviously, going to the shops to buy groceries is one of those every week activities that you have to do. And so, looking at, as you walk into the shops, your child might, be looking at a car, or in the shops, you might see that they reach out to grab something off the shelf, probably something that you don't necessarily want them getting. But yeah, so you're just having a look at what they're focused on, and you can learn about, what your child is interested in. It also tells you what they need at a particular point in time as well. Yeah, so just some simple things to look at.
I can also remember a time sitting at a cafe, and one of the little kids of my friends could hear a siren from some sort of emergency vehicle, as immediately started just like looking and trying to find the fire truck or the ambulance that they could actually hear. And so it's interesting then, as watching their mum and dad engage with that, and say, yes, fire truck, yes, and walk that through. So that's really cool that
Yeah.
that's something so important and really actually helps develop brain development and a strong foundation. So what does this look like, maybe with your kids, Sunshine?
Yeah, I guess thinking back, my son, I think one of his first words was bird. So like if we were out in the yard, say hanging the washing or something, I'd see him point to a bird and try and say bird. Came out more like bah, I think, initially. But because I could, I tuned into what he was pointing to, I could interpret that attempt at his word bird and then respond to it accordingly.
That's great. So the first one we've shared just now, share the focus. Sunshine, you're going to share with us 4 more. So what's the next one?
Yes. So once you've noticed what your child is focused on, the next step is to respond. So that's, taking that turn. We talked about serve and return. So now it's your turn. And, a response can take a lot of different forms. So, and you can still be showing support and encouragement to your child in a variety of ways. So, things like you might say something back to the child. It might just be a smile or a nod to show them that you've seen what they're focused on. So it can be, a different range of ways that you can respond.
And I guess it really is like that tennis match in a way. You're trying to play tennis and, you give them a shot and here's the serve, here's the return. And so if parents give their child kind of what they're looking at, does this count as a response? Because I guess, we don't always want to give what they're looking at, I guess, too. So how does that work?
Yeah, that's right. I mean, certainly that is responding to a child's request, isn't it? So sometimes that's appropriate, but as you say, sometimes it's not. I think, sometimes even just showing the child that you've thought, you've tuned into their thoughts, you've tuned into their feelings, they've been heard and understood is all they need. So, as I was saying, it might just be a smile or a nod, not necessarily having to give them what they want.
Okay. And I've also noticed some friends of mine, sometimes the return actually comes with a challenge. It's like they've seen the toy that they want, but it's it's under the basket. And so, mum or dad isn't just going to remove the basket per se, but say, that's the toy. And, I'm just wondering, is that okay? Like, adding those challenges in.
Yeah, I love that. I think, it's great to think of ways that you can encourage your child to communicate. And if you can make it into a game, then, that's all the better for both involved, isn't it? We want to have fun with our kids. So, yeah, that's good.
That's great. And are there any other ways you would like to share about, just how we can respond as parents?
Yeah, I think, I've talked about a smile or a nod, but, touch can show the child that you've heard them. So, I think about times when, I've been sitting chatting to a friend and, my daughter would come up and want to tell me something or show me something. And, you can't always interrupt the conversation every time a child approaches you, but even, popping her on my lap and, I might just sort of as an aside say, just hang on a second. So just that physical touch can sort of assure her that, yes, I've heard her, I'm responding, and I will get back to her.
Yeah, lovely. That's so good. So that's tip number 2. So the first one was share the child's focus. Second one just now, respond. So Sunshine, what's the third?
Yes. So in the third one, I particularly love because I'm a speechy, but it's about giving a name to what your child is talking about. So obviously this helps build vocabulary, which is, so important. And I guess it's also good to have a think about, often we focus on naming the people in our child's life and naming those sort of everyday objects, drink and shoes and hat and whatever. But certainly with my speechy hat on, it's also good to really remember that things like action words and feelings and describing words are all really important when you're naming something. So things like saying go or push or oh sad or yuck is often, and dirty are ones that little kids often quite like in terms of describing words. So yeah, there's a whole range of verbal responses that you can use to give a name to the situation.
Yeah, that's great. And Sunshine, I'm just wondering, what about those kids who might not be speaking yet or talking or engaging that way? How does that work for kids that age?
Yeah, that's a great question. And I guess it's really just, great to remember that even before a child can talk, it's so important that they're hearing words, because we need to understand words before we can start to use them and apply them. So, that's how we're going to learn words, is by hearing them. So, for example, if your child, points to their foot, you can respond by naming it and say, yeah, that's your foot. They're your feet. You've got 2 feet. So you're
Yeah.
naming it.
And even before that, language has started to occur. What you're saying is that's actually the beginning of language starting to form, is the parent
Yeah.
actually engaging in that process of naming it. So
And even, Andy, stepping back before you name it, just taking turns like peekaboo, because conversation is all about taking turns. That's even, an earlier step. So all of these things are critical steps in developing your child's language, as well as just general brain development.
that's awesome. That's so good. And I'm sure those things our parents are already doing. And because it comes quite naturally, because we're inquisitive of our child's world. And that was the first one. Again, just to reiterate, you said share the child's focus. What are they observing? What are they noticing? Second, we said, respond. It's your turn as the parent to return that serve. And then the third one, which we've just finished now, give it a name. So Sunshine, why don't you share with us what the next tip is for today?
So certainly once we've taken that turn by giving a response, then it's really time to pause and to wait for our child to then take another turn. So, it doesn't sound like much, I guess, but it's actually a really key step, because it allows room for a child to take another turn. Depending on a child's personality and where they are in their development, some children need, more time than others to form a response. And as adults, we can sort of tend to perhaps overload them a bit with, verbalizing things. But sometimes we just need to pause and be quiet and just see if that will allow a child to respond. And we can, wait and look really interestedly at the child. You're creating an expectation that they respond. And that's what we do, with babies. If you think, about when smiling develops way back, in those early weeks, that it's the parent smiles at the child and then they're waiting for a response. So that's sort of the earliest form. And then we build it obviously towards language. And so, that's how we keep an interaction going back and forth, which is a good conversation, isn't it? There's that to and fro in any good conversation.
Exactly. I guess, part of me is wondering, Sunshine, is there too many times? Can you do that? Is it possible where you can just, or what is the number of times that we should be aiming for kind of as parents as well?
Yeah, I think, there's going to be lots of factors that probably impact on that. Depends on the child's interest, how much time is available at that point in the day. And so sometimes it will be just a really quick back and forth, and that's the end of that. It's one turn each, and then you've got to move on to something else. Whereas, at other times it can go on for many, many turns. And, a story can evolve from it, and a whole sequence of play events and so on. So, yeah, it can be really short or it can be longer. And obviously it's nice to have a balance of both in the day. But, yeah, it's not, you don't need to pin it down to a certain number of turns each.
Yeah. And I guess, similarly to this tennis metaphor, some matches are quite short and some matches go on for hours. But that's the joy of it too, is, what's going on and how many times, and engaging with that, and where can it go, and how can those interactions continue to grow. And as I guess parents begin to find out their child's interests as well, and what they might become more aware of as they develop and grow themselves. So that's really cool. Sunshine, we're going to move on to our fifth tip now. So at the start, we had share the child's focus. Number 2, respond. Number 3, give it a name. And number 4, take turns and wait. And so what is our fifth and final tip for today?
Well, I think, this is a really nice segue into our final tip, which is just all about following your child's lead. So children signal to us in different ways when they're done with an activity, when they're ready to move on to something else. So, you might see your child let go of a toy, pick up a new toy, or, turn to have a look at something different. They might walk away from what they're doing or start to fuss, if you think about a younger, like a baby, or they might say, all done. So, lots of different ways that a child can communicate that they've finished that, thank you very much, and ready for something different. And so, when you tune into your child's focus, you'll notice when they're ready to finish that activity and begin something new.
And that turn taking, I guess, and that decision making and learning when to pick that thing back up, and waiting for the lead, I guess, as well, as you've just described. Sunshine, how can parents and caregivers fit in all these little things into a busy schedule? We mentioned that's one of the challenges that parents face in early years of child development, is that they are busy. So how can this look like?
I think, it's just, again, just really reminding ourselves that we're just looking for small moments, a little often, rather than, one great big block of quality time is, better. On less busy days, you can spend more time if need be. But it's just these little things. And they're, as you said earlier, Andy, they are things that most parents just tend to do automatically. But it's good to remember that those things, even though we feel like we do them endlessly from day to day, they are so vital in a child's development. So, just being reminded that it's all very important, and to keep doing it, just slot it into little bits and pieces through the day. Yeah.
Those little opportunities. That sounds so good, Sunshine, and achievable. And I think, that's a real encouragement to our parents, that wherever they find themselves with their kids, to take the time, make the most of it, and where possible, to build these little interactions in that make such a big difference. So, Sunshine, did you want to share again, what were the 5 points from today?
Yes. So first one is share the child's focus, and then responding. You can give it a name as part of that response, taking turns, and then remembering to wait and allow for your child to respond, and then following their lead about whether they want to keep taking turns or move on to a new activity. So they're those key 5 tips that you can just fit into those small everyday moments, and that make a huge difference in a child's development of their brain.
Yeah, brilliant, Sunshine. Thanks so much for sharing those with us. As we come in to finish today's conversation, what is the one thing that you want to encourage parents and caregivers all across Queensland and across our nation? What's the one thing that you'd love to encourage them to do this week?
I think just to remember that they're already doing all the right things, and just to really intentionally continue to include those small everyday moments as they go through their day-to-day routines. So, I think often we can feel that guilt as a parent, but it's not about judging ourselves, but really seeing that we can make even those super small windows of opportunity count. And that's not just for us as the parent, but also, extended family too. It's great to remind them that just those little interactions can be really helpful. And I think it's also really important to remember that, you can't be there for your child. You won't have the energy to engage with your child to the best if you don't look after yourself first. And particularly in those busy early years, finding some time to look after yourself as a parent can be really tricky. And we're not very good often at giving ourselves permission to take that time to fill our own cup, to do what it is that refreshes us. We talk about self-care. We talk about accepting support from people around us, and sometimes we're not good at that. And so, I've found, when my kids were young, and I often say this to, friends who are about to embark on the journey of parenthood, say, in advance, say to your family, look, these are some things that you could do when you come around without me having to ask you. So I think, it's really important to look after yourself. Now that my kids are a bit older, I've found that even taking 5 minutes after I've dropped my daughter at school, before I get out of the car to start work, just sitting for 5 minutes in the car going, can actually set me up so that my brain is not quite so busy, and I can actually, head into my working day a bit fresher. Things like, also for me, going for a walk, being out and, looking at trees and birds and whatever, that can be a really refreshing thing. And obviously that's going to vary for lots of people. And actually, one of our counsellors, Bronwyn, did a webinar recently about this very topic. So, if you're interested in finding out a bit more about it, then have a look at our resource page on our website and have a look at her webinar about looking after yourself.
Yeah, that's fantastic and so important. If we want to be well and look after our kids well and allow them to have the greatest start, then we're going to need to take care of ourselves as parents and carers too. So that's a great point to finish up on there. Sunshine, we're coming into the end, and I'm just wondering, if people want to find out more information about how to help their kids have a great start in life, where could they go, and where would you like to point them towards?
Yes, Andy. So most of the content that we've covered today was drawn from materials produced by Harvard University. So if you'd like further details, you can access it through the Harvard website, the serve and return document, and that link will also be shown in the show notes from today's webinar.
That's really great. Thanks for that. And Sunshine, also, I'd like to remind our listeners and our viewers today that we have a whole range of resources actually on our website, outbackfutures.org.au. You can also follow us on Facebook, Instagram, and also, excitingly, we've launched a podcast using Spotify, which is these webinars being produced there too. So I want to say thank you, Sunshine, for your time today, and thank you for the great tips that you've shared about how we can help our kids have a great start in life. And also thank you to our listeners and our viewers today who have joined us, and we look forward to seeing you soon on one of our next webinars to continue the conversations around how to help kids build resilience for life now and for the future as well. So thanks very much for joining us, Sunshine. And
thanks Andy, for having me.
Take care. See you. Bye.
See you.